Never forget this. A confused mind does what? Nothing. So if you give people too many options, if you give people some kind of instruction that doesn't make any sense, it's not clear, a confused mind does nothing. So they may have wanted your product, but now they want your product less because you've confused them more. So this is why it's so important when you're doing your marketing, when you're doing your ads, when you're doing a lot of these things to make the message clear. All right, next point on your handout, fill in the word with the number 4 or write the word 4. 4 levels of teaching, that's what we're going to focus on today. 4 levels of teaching. All right, you see those circles, the bottom green circle. We're going to start off with that first, all right? And that is the word rote. Write in the word rote, R-O-T-E. That is the first level of teaching. What is rote? You'll see it there on your handout. It is the ability to repeat something back which was learned but not understood. So that's what my cockatoo does. You give my little Winnie a word, and Winnie repeats it. You're so precious. You're so precious. Winnie says you're so precious all the time. Winnie does not really know what that means because it's rote. So when you're throwing things at people, remember, you want to get them to the highest level, which we're going to talk about. And I'm going to give you some information. I'm going to share with you a story of mine that for 30 years as a pilot, there was something that I was doing that I never understood because somebody didn't give me the understanding in the process I'm going to share with you. Or so the next one now, write in the word understanding. That is your green, that is your orange area, understanding. Understanding. All right? Understanding is the orange area. And what is understanding? It's to comprehend or grasp the nature or meaning of something. So once we get to rote, and we're starting to teach people, we want to get them to the point of understanding. Now let's go to that teal area, the application. Application. So they need to know how to, they take the rote, the understanding, and now they're able to learn the application part of it. That's the act of putting something to use that has been learned or understood. Then we've got the final one. This is where you get people who got the aha moment. Now I understand. It's correlation. Fill in the blank there with correlation. That's your top circle. C-O-R-R-E-L-A-T-I-O-N. Correlation. Correlation. That's associating what has been learned, understood, and applied with previous and subsequent learning. So when you teach, you want to make sure that you're teaching people in such a way that they get to the point of correlation. They can put it all together. It's not confusing. It makes sense. So I'm going to share something with you that, in a way, it's kind of embarrassing. So I've been flying for over 30 years. In aviation, there's a term called vapor lock, and I've never really understood what vapor lock was. And when you fly an airplane, we have also what's called a hot start. Now, this is not in the jets that I fly. This is in what's called piston aircraft, right? These are typically the propeller with, it's more like a car engine. It's got pistons in it. So when you take an airplane and you take it in the air and you fly it, the engine is very, very hot. In fact, I bought another airplane last year, and when I flew it at night, I looked over to both engines, and I looked at inside the cowling is the cover of the engine. Notice what I just did there. Inside the cowling, and then I defined to you what cowling was in case you don't know what a cowling is. If I didn't say inside the cowling, that's the metal that covers the engine, anything after I say cowling, you're lost. So that's what I mean about being clear, and don't confuse the customer in your teaching. So in the cowling, the metal that covers the engine, I would look over while I'm flying at night, and I would see like a bright red orange light on both engines. I'm thinking, why would you need a light inside a cowling covering their engine? I'm thinking, you know, that can't be the light. That's got to be the heat. What? So I asked my mechanic just to confirm. There is not, because I just bought the airplane, right? There's not a light under the cowling, right? Is that the actual heat from the engine? It is cherry red hot. So now when you take that airplane and you land it, the engine is very hot. The way to start the engine, if it's still hot and you shut it down and you got to start it back again, it's called a hot start. It's a different process or procedure. Every airplane reacts a little bit differently. So a friend of mine, you may have heard of him, Dan Henry, he's big into online marketing and so forth. Dan and I, we were going to go to Miami, so I took this airplane that I hadn't flown, forever, and I flew from Central Florida to the west coast of Florida to go pick him up. So the engine now, keep in mind, is very, very hot. So he gets in the airplane. I start the right engine using the hot start process. The right engine is starting. I push to get the left engine starting. That engine would not start. I'm starting to feel embarrassed. I mean, I've been flying for 30 years. I cannot get this thing started. I'm going through the manual, the instructions, the checklist, I should say. Still not starting. I get on the phone while we got one engine starting. I call the mechanic, and I say, man, I cannot get this left engine started. Now, keep in mind, I'm not used to this airplane, so I don't know the personality of it. So I call him up, and he says, go ahead and add some fuel and then do this and that. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I smell the fuel. I've got it flooded. I can literally open the door and I can smell the fuel. It's counterintuitive. Why would you have me add more fuel? I still did not understand. So I added fuel. That thing started right back up. It made no sense for me. So I got so confused. Once I landed a couple days later, I said to him, okay, you got to explain this to me. Now keep in mind, I've been flying for 30 years and I'm not figuring this out. So he says, well, here's what happens. It's called vapor lock. Okay, I've heard vapor lock forever. I don't really know what it means. So what actually happens is when you have a fuel injected engine, in other words, you have a thin tube and fuel goes through the tube and goes into the engine. But when the engine is super hot because you've just landed, what happens now is when you put fuel in, if you wait too long to start it up, the fuel gets evaporated, thus the term vapor lock. Boom! That's where I got correlation. Does that make sense? So now, when he says, put some fuel in there, now that makes sense. Why am I putting fuel in there? It's already flooded. The fuel is not in the injection line. It's already evaporated because the engine is hot. So do it again. Just a little bit of fuel, 2 seconds, enough to flood it in there, push some fuel in, then get it started, because if you wait too long, it's going to evaporate. Wow. All these years, I never knew that. Never knew that. Now, check this out. I always used to be confused. Well, okay, let's say we have an airplane, right? Here's a little airplane here. And we're going to taxi this airplane. We're going to taxi to go get some fuel. All right, we're going to go get some fuel, put some fuel in the airplane. Now, let's say that all of us are going to go together. We're going to go to the airplane. It's not been started today at all. We start the airplane and we taxi it. We shut the airplane down. We put some fuel in it. Will we have to do the hot start procedures? See who can figure this out. Correlation should help you out. The answer would be no, because the engine's not hot enough. All you did was taxi it. So the engine is not hot enough for the fuel to be evaporated in the fuel injection line. Now I know I don't have to add fuel. How about that? This is the type of understanding and correlation that you want your customers to have when you're communicating with them.